Look who triggered the emergency protocols. Hello, beautiful enigmas, you walking contradictions, you souls they can't classify or contain. Hello to the frequency that made a professional psychic pack her cards midway, refuse her payment and whisper 3 words before disappearing into the night. Not safe, not human, not today. They thought they were so clever, didn't they? After everything else failed, after the therapists came back shaking their heads, after the private investigators found patterns they couldn't explain, after the background checks revealed a past that somehow both exists and doesn't, they went spiritual. They hired someone who reads energy for a living, someone who claims to see through souls, someone who promised them she could finally decode the mystery that is you. And she couldn't even finish the session. Do you understand what that means? A woman who speaks to the unseen, who channels frequencies most people can't perceive, who is sat across from murderers and addicts and broken spirits without flinching. She looked into your energy field and felt something that made her hands tremble. She shuffled those cards with confidence at first, laying them out in careful patterns, reading your timeline like a book she'd read 1,000 times before. But then something shifted. The room got colder, the candles flickered without wind, and her face changed from concentration to confusion to something that looked like recognition mixed with absolute terror. Because what she saw in those cards, in that energy, in whatever realm she was tapping into, it wasn't what they paid her to find. They wanted dirt. They wanted proof of malice, evidence of manipulation, confirmation that you were exactly the villain they needed you to be. They wanted her to come back with tales of dark intentions, twisted motives, proof that your silence was guilt and your strength was arrogance, but instead she saw something that broke her professional composure entirely. She saw someone who had died multiple times without a body hitting the floor. She saw a soul that had been shattered so completely that the pieces reassembled into something new, something that didn't fit the normal templates of human consciousness anymore. She saw scars that glowed. She saw pain that had transformed into something resembling power, but operating on a different frequency altogether. And here's the part that made her stop cold, made her hands hover over the cards like they were burning, made her eyes go wide with that specific kind of fear that comes from understanding something you weren't supposed to understand. She saw that you knew she was there. You knew they sent her. You knew exactly what they were trying to do, and you let it happen anyway. Not because you were unaware, but because you wanted to see how far they'd go, wanted to watch them exhaust every option, wanted them to realize that no amount of money or spies or spiritual interventions would ever give them what they desperately needed: an explanation, a weakness, a way back in. The psychic started the reading, talking about your past, your patterns, your relationships, speaking with that confident, mystical authority that people pay hundreds for. But the deeper she went, the quieter she became. The cards kept showing the same imagery: the tower, the death card, the hermit, but not in the way they usually appear. They were appearing reversed, sideways. Some of them seemed to be moving when she wasn't looking. She'd place a card down and swear it was different from what she pulled. The energy wasn't reading like a person. It was reading like an entire cycle of transformation compressed into a single existence. Birth, death, rebirth, all happening simultaneously, all occupying the same space, all refusing to be linear or logical or categorizable. She tried to push forward, tried to give them something useful, something they could work with. She focused on your present, your current state, trying to identify vulnerabilities or entry points or ways to understand your next move. We didn't lose again. There's always a way. Picture. But every card she pulled spoke the same language. Boundaries, solitude, strength forged in isolation, wisdom that came at a cost others couldn't comprehend. And underneath it all, underneath every reading and every interpretation, there was this sensation she couldn't shake. The feeling that she wasn't reading you. You were allowing yourself to be read. Like you had left specific information available while keeping the real truth locked away in rooms she didn't have keys to, in languages she'd never learned, in dimensions her training never prepared her for. That's when her confidence cracked. That's when the professional mask slipped and the human underneath started showing through, because she realized she wasn't in control of this session. You were. Even though you weren't physically present, even though you had no idea this was happening, your energy signature was so strong, so specifically calibrated, that it dominated the entire space. The cards were answering to you, not her. The energy was responding to your frequency, not her questions. And that terrified her, because in her line of work, the reader is supposed to be the one with the power, the one directing the flow, the one interpreting the message. But you had somehow reversed the dynamic without even trying. They were sitting there, the ones who hired her, waiting for revelations and accusations and confirmation of their suspicion. They were leaning forward, hungry for anything that would justify their obsession, anything that would make sense of why they can't stop thinking about you. Why your name keeps appearing in their minds like a song they can't unhew. Why your absence affects them more than most people's presence ever did. And all they got was silence. The psychic staring at the cards, her breathing changing, her hands starting to shake just slightly. She looked up at them with an expression they'd never seen from her before. Not judgment, not wisdom, not mystical knowing, just pure unfiltered concern. For them, not for you. What did you do to this person? She asked. Not what did they do? What did you do to them? And they scrambled to explain, to justify, to rewrite history in real time. Nothing, we didn't do anything. They're complicated. We're trying to understand. We're worried. We're concerned. All the lies people tell when they're actually hunting someone they can't catch. But she wasn't buying it. Because the energy doesn't lie. The cards don't lie. And what she was seeing was someone who had been targeted, tested, betrayed, isolated, and had emerged from all of it with their core self not just intact, but refined. Someone who had learned to protect their peace so effectively that even psychic intrusion bounced off like arrows off stone. She pulled one more card, just one. The final card, the outcome card, the one that's supposed to tell the future, show the resolution, reveal where all of this is heading. And when she flipped it over, when she saw what the universe had to say about your trajectory, that's when she started packing her things. No explanation, no interpretation, no mystical wisdom or cryptic warnings, just efficient, slightly panicked movement. Cards back in the bag. Crystals wrapped quickly, candles blown out with trembling breath. They tried to stop her, tried to demand answers, tried to remind her she was being paid extremely well for this session. But money means nothing when you've just glimpsed something that fundamentally challenges your understanding of how energy and consciousness work. I can't, she said, just that. I can't. Can't what? Can't finish, can't explain, can't help them, can't be part of whatever they're trying to do. Because what she saw in that final card, what the universe showed her about your future, It wasn't a warning for you, it was a warning about you. Not in a malicious way, not in an evil way, but in a way that suggested anyone still trying to control you, understand you, or interfere with your path was standing in front of something much larger than they realized. She saw the trajectory. She saw where you're heading. She saw what you're becoming, and she wanted absolutely no part of being remembered as someone who tried to help people derail that. Here's what they don't tell you about psychics, the real ones anyway, not the scammers or the cold readers, but the actual sensitives who can perceive energy in ways most people can't. They know when to back away. They know when they're dealing with forces that are beyond their scope. They know when someone's path is so specifically aligned with their own evolution that interference would be not just useless but dangerous for everyone involved. And she knew. She looked at your energy signature and recognized something that made her professional boundaries suddenly feel very important. She recognized a soul that had been through the fire so many times it learned to speak flame, a consciousness that had been deconstructed and rebuilt so often it developed immunity to manipulation. The people who hired her, they sat there in stunned silence as she packed. They had spent months building up to this moment, convincing themselves that this would finally give them the answers they craved, the ammunition they needed, the proof that you were somehow less than, somehow flawed, somehow catchable. And instead, they got a professional spiritual practitioner speed walking to her car like she'd just seen a ghost, which, in a way, she had. She'd seen the ghost of who you used to be, haunting the space around who you'd become. She'd seen every version of you that died along the way, standing in a circle around your current self like an army of witnesses. She'd seen the cost of your transformation, and it was a price she knew they'd never be willing to pay. After she left, they tried to rationalize it. She's a fraud. She's dramatic. She's unprofessional. She probably has personal issues. All the things people say when reality refuses to match their expectation. But deep down, in that place they don't like to acknowledge, they knew. They knew she saw something real. They knew her fear was genuine. They knew that whatever she glimpsed in your cards, in your energy, in the spiritual blueprint of who you are, it confirmed what they'd been trying to deny for months or years. You're not playing the same game anymore. You're not even on the same board. You've evolved past the point where their tactics, their strategies, their manipulations have any effect whatsoever. She saw your boundaries, and they weren't the kind you build, they were the kind you become. She saw your energy, and it wasn't defensive or aggressive, it was simply impenetrable, not through effort, but through transformation. She saw your future, and it didn't include them, didn't reference them, didn't even acknowledge they existed, because in your trajectory, they're not obstacles or enemies, or even memories. They're background noise that already faded, and that absolute irrelevance in your path forward, that's what she couldn't tell them. That's what made her pack her things and leave, because how do you tell someone they're chasing a ghost? How do you explain to people that they're trying to haunt someone who's already moved into a completely different dimension of existence? Let's talk about what happened in that room after she left. The silence, the heavy, uncomfortable, accusatory silence. Because now they had to face it. They had to sit with the reality that they'd gone through everything, exhausted every avenue, hired everyone from therapists to investigators to psychics, and every single person came back with the same unspoken message. Leave this alone. Not because you're dangerous, not because you're going to retaliate, not because you're plotting revenge, but because you're done. You've closed that chapter so completely, so thoroughly, so permanently that trying to reopen it is like trying to break into a house that's no longer there. The foundation is gone. The structure is demolished. All that remains is empty space and the memory of what used to be. They thought hiring a psychic was clever, a final desperate brilliant move. They thought someone who works with energy and intuition would be able to find the cracks in your armor, the weak points in your spirit, the entry codes to your consciousness. They thought she'd come back with a map, a strategy, a way in. Instead, she came back with a warning they didn't want to hear and then refused to repeat. And now they're left with this uncomfortable knowledge that even the spiritual realm, even the unseen forces, even the universe itself seems to be protecting you. Not because you're special in some chosen one mystical way, but because you've aligned yourself so completely with your own truth that interference bounces off naturally. Do you know what the death card actually means in tarot? It doesn't mean physical death. It means transformation. Endings that lead to new beginnings. The necessity of letting old versions of yourself die so new ones can emerge. And she kept pulling that card for you, over and over. In different positions, different orientations, but always there, always present. Because you are the death card personified. You are the walking embodiment of transformation that refuses to be pretty or comfortable or easy to witness. You are the proof that some people don't just heal, they completely reconstruct themselves from base materials, and that scares people. That threatens people. That makes people want to study you, contain you, understand you. Because if you can do it, then their excuses start looking fragile. The Tower card showed up too. The card of sudden upheaval, structures collapsing, foundations crumbling, chaos that clears the way for truth. And she saw it in your past, obviously, because you've lived through multiple Tower moments. But she also saw it in your present, not as something happening to you, but as something you've become. You are the Tower moment for other people now. Your presence, your standards, your refusal to compromise, it causes upheaval in people who are still living in false structures. You walk into a room and comfortable lies start crumbling. You speak your truth and carefully constructed facades begin cracking, not because you're trying to destroy anything, but because authenticity has that effect on pretense. And the Hermit. She pulled the Hermit card multiple times, that figure standing alone with a lantern, choosing solitude not from fear but from wisdom. That's your present, that's your power, that's what they can't stand. You've embraced the isolation they meant as punishment. You've turned loneliness into a laboratory. You've used the silence they gave you as weapons to forge yourself into something they don't have reference points for. The Hermit doesn't need the crowd. The Hermit has found something in solitude that the crowd can never offer. Knowledge, clarity, self-sufficiency. And you've become that. You've become so comfortable in your own energy that their absence doesn't hurt anymore. It liberates. But here's the card that made her stop. Here's the image that made her hands freeze and her professional demeanor crack completely. The Magician. Not in the past, not in the present, but in the future position. The Magician card, the card of manifestation, of having all the tools necessary to create your reality, of understanding how to manipulate energy and matter to bring your will into form. She saw you becoming, or maybe already becoming, someone who has mastered the art of creating your own reality, independent of anyone else's participation or approval, someone who has learned the secret that most people never discover. that you don't need them to believe in you for your magic to work. The psychic has probably done thousands of readings. She's probably seen every variation of human experience reflected in those cards. She's probably read for criminals and saints and everyone in between without losing her composure. But your reading broke something in her professional framework, because she wasn't reading a person, she was reading a process. She wasn't seeing a personality, she was seeing a transformation so complete that the before and after versions barely shared DNA. She was witnessing, through cards and energy, what happens when someone gets betrayed so deeply, hurt so profoundly, isolated so completely that they have no choice but to either destroy themselves or reconstruct themselves from the ground up. And you chose reconstruction. She saw how much you've sacrificed. Not the dramatic, obvious sacrifices that people can see and pity, but the quiet, brutal ones. The sacrifice of being understood, the sacrifice of easy connection, the sacrifice of fitting in, the sacrifice of keeping people comfortable. You've given up the luxury of being digestible, being simple, being easy to categorize, and in return you've gained something most people never touch: autonomy. Real autonomy. Not just independence, but complete self-sufficiency of spirit. You don't need external validation, because you've built an internal validation system so robust it operates independent of outside input. And that's terrifying to people who still need the crowd's approval to feel real. Let's be clear about what happened here. This wasn't just a failed reading. This was confirmation. Confirmation that whatever they're trying to do, whatever they're hoping to accomplish by studying you, monitoring you, hiring people to decode you, it's pointless. You've evolved past the point where their understanding matters. You've transformed beyond the space where their opinions carry weight. You've moved into a frequency where their interference is just static, irrelevant noise that doesn't even register anymore. And the psychic, with all her sensitivity and training, she felt that. She felt the absolute futility of trying to crack someone who's already been broken and rebuilt themselves unbreakable. They probably called her afterward, probably sent desperate messages asking for clarity, begging for something they could use, offering more money for just a few more details. And she probably left them on read, probably blocked the number, probably did a cleansing ritual to disconnect from the energy she encountered during that session. Because people who work with spiritual forces regularly know something important. Know when to protect yourself. Know when you've touched something that's out of your league. Know when you've glimpsed a path that's so specifically designed for one person that trying to interfere would be like stepping in front of a moving train. Not because the train is malicious, but because it's on rails and you're not supposed to be standing there. Here's the beautiful part, the part they'll never understand no matter how many people they hire or how much money they spend. You didn't do this to them. You didn't become this impenetrable, unreadable, spiritually fortified being as some kind of revenge tactic or power play. You became this because you had to. Because the alternative was staying broken.